So hi everybody, and we're almost through with the first unit. In the previous videos, we've introduced the concept of sequential games. In these games, we have one player deciding first and the other player following with his or her decision. So in this last video lecture for today, we're going to look at whether the player who decides first has some sort of a strategic advantage and if he can influence the decision of the second player to its favor. So for this, let's have a look at the market for domestic flights in Germany a couple of years ago. So within Germany, we had Lufthansa as a monopolist on domestic flights. So whenever you wanted to fly from Munich to Berlin, then Lufthansa was the carrier that you had to choose. And with deregulation, there came other firms that were thinking about coming into the market. And interestingly, these were not necessarily startups, but these were also giants in other parts of the world. And British Airways, as one of the largest airlines worldwide, also considered entering the market. They did consider entering the market through a subsidiary called German BA or Deutsche BA. And of course, Lufthansa, having been a monopolist for a long time, were not happy with this and threatened British Airways to start a price war after entry. And so the question we're asking is if this was a credible threat. Is this something that British Airways should have believed when Lufthansa announced this? So let's try and represent this as a game, and a sequential game in particular. So we have Deutsche BA deciding if they wanted to stay out of the market or if they want to enter. At that point, the decision comes to Lufthansa. If Deutsche BA stays out of the market, then Lufthansa has nothing to do. They just carry on as they did before. If Deutsche BA enters the market, then Lufthansa has two choices. They can either start a price war, as they've announced, or they can decide not to start a price war. So they just change their mind and say, well, we're going to keep prices as is, and we're going to share the market with Deutsche BA. Now, again, let's have a look at some fictitious numbers for payoffs for Deutsche BA and Lufthansa. If Deutsche BA does not enter the market and nothing changes for Lufthansa, then Deutsche BA, of course, makes profits of 0 because nothing changes for them, and Lufthansa make their monopoly profits, which we assume to be 1,000. If Deutsche BA comes into the market, then if Lufthansa starts a price war, Deutsche BA makes losses of 500 and Lufthansa gets profits of 0. If Deutsche BA enters and there is no price war, then both share the market and they get profits of 400 each. So with this in mind, let's revisit the concept of a Nash equilibrium. A Nash equilibrium, as we know, is a combination of two behaviors, one for each player, for which none of the players has an incentive to deviate unilaterally. So that means that if we keep the other player's strategy as given, no player of the two has an incentive to change what they're currently doing. So if we look at this game tree, let's try and find the Nash equilibria. The first one is going to be Deutsche BA entering the market and Lufthansa not starting a price war. Let's have a look. Well, if Deutsche BA has entered the market, then Lufthansa can choose between starting a price war, getting profits of 0, and not starting a price war and getting profits of 400. So if they choose whatever maximizes their profits, given the strategy of the other player, of Deutsche BA, then it's best for them not to start a price war. Now, given that Lufthansa does not start a price war, what's Deutsche BA's best strategy? Well, if they enter the market, they get profits of 400. If they stay out of the market, they're going to get profits of 0. So the best strategy, given that Lufthansa does not start a price war, is to enter the market for BA. Okay, so that's the first Nash equilibrium that we found. There is, however, a second Nash equilibrium as well, and that's this one here. So let's have a look. If Deutsche BA, or if Lufthansa starts a price war here, then Deutsche BA can choose if they want to enter the market and make profits of minus 500, or if they want to stay out and make profits of 0. So their best strategy is not to enter the market, given that Lufthansa starts a price war. How about for Lufthansa? If Deutsche BA stays out of the market, it doesn't even matter what Lufthansa does at this point. So they're indifferent between starting a price war and not starting a price war because they get profits of 1,000 anyway. So this is as good an answer as any, meaning that there is no incentive to change your behavior given that Deutsche BA does not enter the market. So the second Nash equilibrium is no market entry from Deutsche BA and a price war from Lufthansa. So which one of those is the one that we believe more? Which one of those seems more rational, more sensible somehow? Well, let's have a look at this part of the game. This we call a subgame. So if Deutsche BA has entered the market, we're going to have to ask the question, what's the best strategy for Lufthansa? They can choose to start a price war and get profits of 0, or they cannot start a price war and get profits of 400. So the profit maximizing behavior in this subgame is not to start a price war, which means that the second Nash equilibrium, right, the equilibrium based on the red lines here, is not one that we would believe, because Lufthansa does not behave optimally at this point in this subgame. So in other words, if we played the game, we would expect that Deutsche BA enters the market because they expect Lufthansa not to start a price war if push comes to shove, because it's profit maximizing. It's optimal for Lufthansa to do that. So if we go back to our initial question, is it a credible threat to threaten British Airways to start a price war after entry? We can answer it's not, because it would rely on suboptimal behavior at some point. So Lufthansa, of course, knows this, and they were thinking about changing their behavior somehow. So they commit now to a price war, and they do it by signing a contract with Star Alliance, specifying a penalty of 500 if Lufthansa do not start a price war after Deutsche BA's entry. And the question we ask then is this now a credible threat? Does it now make sense? Does Deutsche BA now believe that Lufthansa would actually start a price war? Well, again, let's have a look at the game. And we know that if no contract is signed, these are going to be the payoffs. Now, if Lufthansa signs this contract, if they commit to this contractual penalty of 500, what's going to happen? It's going to change the payoffs of Lufthansa not running a price war if Deutsche BA enters the market. And it's going to change it from 400 to minus 100. Okay, so payoffs actually become worse once they sign the contract. However, what's the outcome of the game then? Well, again, if we're looking for subgame perfect Nash equilibria, we have to look at this subgame. And within the subgame, given the contractual penalty, Lufthansa can now choose between not starting a price war and making minus 100, or starting a price war and making 0. So for them now, the best response to Deutsche BA entering the market becomes to start a price war. And if that's something that British Airways can anticipate, then British Airways will respond, or will respond in anticipation by not entering the market. So the sensible Nash equilibrium now is the second one, and we would expect this one to be played. Okay, so to answer that question, does that contract serve as a credible threat? Yes, it does. So British Airways should believe that kind of threat, whereas they didn't believe the previous kind of threat because it was cheap talk. Okay, so to wrap up, what did we do in this session? Well, in this session we looked at a sequential game again, and we showed that commitment, in a particular way, commitment can change the way the game is played. And in particular for Lufthansa, it was important that they change their payoffs so that they don't play whatever they don't like if a particular contingency arises. So the contingency here was that British Airways enters, and they sort of felt, well, we need to force ourselves to commit to a price war. And they did that by signing that commitment, signing that contract with the Star Alliance. So that's one way in which you can use strategic thinking and in which you can use commitment strategies to actually improve your payoffs in a competitive situations. So for now, stay on till the wrap up, and thanks very much for staying through the first session. Thanks, and see you very soon.